Marvel type pictures, where the theaters become amusement parks. It's not cinema, it's something else. It's not cinema, it's something else. It's not cinema, it's something else. It's not cinema, it's...
Hey, put down your pitchforks, I'll rank them for real. Iron Man is a very simple movie. Shot, reverse shot, even lighting, no shadows, and a sheen of consummate professionalism. But simple is not always a bad thing as long as it's effective. And I think the first Iron Man movie is proof of that. There's a reason why it became the blueprint for the rest of the MCU. They use a template that they know is going to work, and they put all of their creative energy into the characters, and it really pays off with the first Iron Man movie because Robert Downey Jr. as Tony Stark is just an awesome character. I'm gonna put Iron Man into the cinema tier. Tony Stark is definitely kind of a dick at the beginning of this movie, but you still kind of like him just because Robert Downey Jr. is so charismatic, and then he has this character arc that is pretty much executed perfectly. The back half of the movie gets a little bit dumb. Jeff Bridges starts going ape shit for no real reason other than he just hates Tony Stark, I guess. But it's still a really good movie overall. The Incredible Hulk pretty much has the vibes of a straight to Netflix action movie, so I'm gonna put it into the bad tier. Iron Man 2 is basically a filler episode in a TV show. This movie pretty much only exists so it can set up the future Avengers movie, and Tony Stark actually kind of regresses as a character in this movie. Nothing really interesting happens. Iron Man 2 goes into the bad tier. The first Thor movie, it's alright. It's not that bad. Maybe I'm cutting this movie a little bit of slack just because I wasn't sick of the MCU yet at this point. The one thing that annoyed the shit out of me about this movie is all those weird tilted Dutch angles or whatever. I get what they're going for. It's supposed to create this sense of disorientation. Thor, he's like this Norse god who's trapped in New Mexico, so of course you're supposed to feel a little bit of disorientation, but they way overused it in this movie to the point where it just got extremely annoying. Like, they would just randomly have an establishing shot of a diner and they just had to tilt it and do this weird disorienting Dutch angle. It was extremely annoying, but outside of that, this movie's actually kind of watchable. It has a nice little character arc, some fun little hijinks and camaraderie when they're in New Mexico. There's some funny little fish out of water jokes. It's not too bad. I didn't mind Thor. I'll put it in the alright tier. Captain America, the First Avengers. Okay, here's the thing. Steve Rogers is kind of a goody two-shoes, or as we Canadians like to say, he's a bit of a fucking keener. They did a pretty good job with the VFX in this, but at the same time, it is still very jarring seeing this guy with the face of a 30-year-old Chad, but he's like this little dude who's getting wedgies and shit. However, even with all that, you can't help but love the guy. Steve Rogers is so likable in this movie. He's just such a rootable underdog, and I will stand by this. The ending of this movie is legitimately one of the best endings in any blockbuster movie I've ever seen, but unfortunately the movie does have kind of a dog shit second act and a pretty forgettable villain, and also if you look at it as a World War II movie, it is extremely weak in that regard. Overall, I'm gonna put it into the good tier just because I do think this is really good as a superhero origin story. Okay, Avengers, I have been quite harsh on this movie in previous videos, but I have to admit, I have been rewatching the MCU, at least phases 1 through 3 for the past few months, and I have kind of gained a little bit of a new appreciation for this movie. I still don't love it. I still don't think it really works that well as an individual movie, but it is kind of good if you view it as the season finale of a TV show. It's kind of the cinematic equivalent of a WWE match where all of the most popular faces team up together to fight the biggest heel. I still don't think it's that good of a movie, but it's alright. It's a decent time if you view it as the season finale of season 1. Iron Man 3, apparently a lot of people really hate this movie because of the Mandarin twist. I don't really care that much about the comic book implications. I didn't mind the twist. I thought it was fine. The movie is nothing special and it's a little bit corny, but it kind of works a little bit as a James Bond inspired superhero movie, I guess. I'll put it into the alright tier. It wasn't that bad. Captain America Winter Soldier, I've heard a lot of people say that this is the best MCU movie. I don't know if I would go that far. Yes, it is pretty good as a spy thriller type movie, but I would honestly rather just watch Jason Bourne. This is not as good as The Bourne Identity in my opinion, but I'm still gonna put Winter Soldier into the greatest hits tier just because it actually does work really well. It's a standalone movie. You don't even have to be an MCU fan. If you're a fan of like Jason Bourne or even like Casino Royale or something like that, you'll probably like Winter Soldier. Overall, it's a good movie. It was really well done. I had a great time watching it. Guardians of the Galaxy definitely goes into the cinema tier. I really love this movie. This was the first MCU movie that I felt really had its own personality and style to it beyond just the characters. It does have great characters, some of the best in the MCU in my opinion. It also has its own unique aesthetic style to it, not only with the visuals, but obviously as well with the soundtrack and just the overall vibe and tone of the movie. Up until this point in the MCU, Guardians of the Galaxy had by far the most personality of any of these movies, and it also has a lot of heart to it with its story about friendship and all that. Some of it is a little bit whack, especially the whole dance-off thing in the third act. That was kind of dumb in my opinion. But overall, I really enjoy Guardians of the Galaxy. Easily goes into the cinema tier. Ant-Man, it's alright, it's fine. It's just like a pleasant little heist movie. Paul Rudd kind of carries this movie. It's just fine, it's alright. Okay, Civil War. This is definitely where people are going to start to get mad. I've heard a lot of people say that this is just one of the best superhero movies ever. I'm sorry. I wish I was on your level. I don't see it. I don't really get it. The whole conflict between Tony Stark and Steve Rogers, it's cool. It's interesting. But I feel like they just didn't really do that much with it. It never really turned out to be this huge high stakes civil war. And it was more so just a brawl in an airport parking lot. We got some pretty cool action scenes out of it and some cool character conflicts. But if they had really committed to a full-on actual Civil War movie and not just kind of this half-baked type Civil War that we got, this could have been so much better. Oh, and also this movie is just so bloated. It's almost 3 hours long and it's kind of hard to sit through at times. So I'm sorry to a lot of the hardcore MCU fans out there, but I can only put this into the alright tier. Doctor Strange, whatever. It has some cool visuals and VFX and all that. Guardians 2 is definitely a mess of a movie. The whole B-plot with Taserface and all that stuff, that was pretty lame, to be honest. It not only felt kind of pointless, but a lot of the jokes were just really bad and they kept on repeating them over and over again to the point where it got super annoying. And the main A-plot with Ego, there was some very cool aspects to it, but a lot of the times it just felt a little bit dull and lacking tension. But just because it had the Brandy needle drop and Kurt Russell having a pretty cool performance as a villain here, I'm gonna put Guardians 2 into the alright tier. Spider-Man Homecoming, it's alright. I can see why a lot of people love this movie, but I'll be honest, if I'm gonna watch a high school movie, I'd way rather just watch Mean Girls or Heathers, not this fucking Disney Channel Hannah Montana type shit. Thor Ragnarok, I love this movie. This is such an entertaining movie. I'm gonna put it into the greatest hits tier. It doesn't quite go into the cinema tier because I think this movie is just lacking a little bit when it comes to the heart, and it almost got there. But other than that, this is definitely one of the best MCU movies in my opinion, so I'm actually gonna put it at the top of the greatest hits tier. Black Panther, PlayStation 2 graphics at the end, but Wakanda has some really awesome world building and it has a really cool villain and it actually has some of the most thematic depth in the MCU. Avengers Infinity War, kind of like with the first Avengers movie, is basically the cinematic equivalent of a WWE fight. But I have to say, this is probably the best you could possibly make that type of movie. I respect it. I gotta put Infinity War into the cinema tier. It's definitely pretty far from being a perfect movie. It has a lot of the same things that annoy the shit out of me about the MCU, especially with the excessive pop culture references and quipping. Oh, and we also know that Thanos is pretty much a total fucking idiot. His plan makes no sense. Let's just look at the world population. Right now, it's at 8 billion. He's gonna snap out 50% of the population, which means we're gonna go back to the population from 1974. Okay, brother, you're not really doing that much. If you're really gonna try to solve the overpopulation problem by snapping things out of existence, 50% ain't nearly enough. You got to go to 99%, brother. That's the only way you're actually going to solve the problem. Or better yet, you could just use your Infinity Stones to snap in some more resources for everyone. But I'd be lying if I said this movie is not just fucking awesome. This is about as good as they possibly could have made this. They executed their vision pretty much perfectly outside of the annoying pop culture references and stuff. When people say that Marvel movies are theme park movies and not cinema, I don't really agree with that, but Infinity War would probably actually be the prime example of it just being a theme park movie. But it does that so well that it crosses back over into being cinema. I respect it a lot, so I'm gonna put it into the cinema tier. Avengers Endgame, fan service the movie. Okay, I was very brutal on this movie the last time I talked about it, but I have to admit, I have come around a little bit on this movie. I still don't think it really works that well as an actual movie. It's basically just pure fan service where they travel back to previous MCU movies. But I have to admit, after binging through phases 1 through 3 over the past few months and actually getting pretty into the MCU, Endgame does hit pretty hard in that mindset when you view it more as being this big series finale of a TV show. As a movie, it's really not that good, but it accomplishes exactly what it needed to do in tying everything together in a satisfying way. I think Greatest Hits is the perfect tier to put Endgame in. One, because this movie basically is the MCU Greatest Hits album, but also because you couldn't have the MCU being as iconic as it is, at least the first 3 phases, without Endgame being as satisfying of a conclusion as it was, even if it is kind of a sloppy, messy, dumb movie. Spider-Man Far From Home, I'll be honest, I pretty much remember absolutely nothing about this movie. Shang-Chi, honestly, it should just go into the alright tier because it's kind of the same thing as like Ant-Man or all these other movies. But I'm going to bump this up into good just for the vibes. Okay, this is what I have to say about Eternals. Adding Pink Floyd music and making references to the Epic of Gilgamesh does not make your movie deep. I kind of respect what they were going for with this movie. They were trying to do a little bit more than the typical good versus evil that you see in most MCU movies. They were trying to add a little bit of an ethical dilemma to it, but they really didn't go deep enough into it to make up for the fact that all of the characters in this are boring wooden planks. And at the end of the day, it's really the characters that makes or breaks an MCU movie. That is what makes these movies great. It's the characters. So I'm sorry to the Eternals fans, but I'm just going to put it into the whatever tier. I'm not going to put it into the bad tier just because I at least do respect the ambition. Spider-Man No Way Home. This is pretty much the Avengers Endgame of Spider-Man movies. But the thing is, Endgame was a satisfying conclusion to phases 1 through 3. Spider-Man No Way Home, it didn't quite have that level of heart to it that Endgame had. Plus, it didn't really feel like it added that much to the Spider-Man movies throughout the years. So I'm just going to put this into the all right tier. It was kind of fun to watch, but ultimately, yeah, it's just fan service that didn't have the same emotional payoffs that Endgame had. Doctor Strange and the Multiverse of Madness. This is one of the most nonsensical, incoherent movies in the entire MCU. The whole multiverse concept is an absolute mess and they did nothing with it. But with all that being said, I do kind of like what Sam Raimi was doing here. He brought in a lot of the Evil Dead 2 style into the MCU. For being background visuals and noise at a Halloween party, this would be kind of a banger. So I'll just put it into the whatever tier. Wakanda Forever, it was alright, it was fine. Guardians of the Galaxy Volume 3, I have no idea if this is a hot take or not, but I think this is one of the best MCU movies. I'm gonna put it into the cinema tier. It's definitely not a perfect movie, okay? Like 20% of this movie is an absolute sloppy mess, a lot of pacing issues in the second act, and a lot of jokes that fall flat. But the other 80% of this movie is actually kind of genius. Even if it's not a perfect movie, I respect the vision on this one. First of all, super weird movie with some insane character designs and locations and all that. But what really separates this movie from a lot of other MCU movies for me is The fact that the main A plot is like this heist planet hopping adventure, but it feels like it has actual stakes to it because they did such a great job of establishing Rocket Raccoon's storyline, and you really just care about them going and saving Rocket. This movie just feels like it has some of the most heart and soul to it compared to any other MCU movie. Deadpool and Wolverine, yeah, I'm just gonna put this into the whatever tier. I already did a review of this back in the early days of my channel. I know I'm in the minority here, okay? I wish I liked it as much as everyone else. I just don't, okay? I just don't really like this movie that much. I'm not saying it's a bad movie. I think it's fine. I just personally don't really like it. Sorry. If you want to see a tier list where every single movie would be on the cinema tier, check out this classic cinema tier list.